They say grief makes you weak. They say losing your wife of 47 years breaks a man down to nothing, leaves him hollow and vulnerable, easy to push around. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, was counting on that. She looked at me across my own dining room table 1 week after I buried Margaret, and I could see it in her eyes, the calculation, the cold arithmetic of inheritance, the absolute certainty that I was finished. She was wrong, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the day everything I thought I knew about family turned to ash in my mouth. Margaret died on a Tuesday. The cancer took her fast in the end, faster than the doctor said it would. One moment she was sitting up in bed telling me about the hydrangeas in the garden and how they needed pruning, and the next she was gone. Just gone. 47 years of marriage, of building a life together, of creating something that mattered, erased in the space between one breath and the next. I held her hand as it went cold. I sat there for 3 hours before I could even move, before I could even think about calling anyone. And when I finally did pick up that phone, when I finally called my son Michael to tell him his mother was gone, you know what I heard in his voice? Relief. Not grief, not shock. Relief. "We'll be there tomorrow, Dad," he said. "Lisa and I will handle everything. You just rest." Rest. As if I was the one who needed handling. As if I was already an inconvenience to be managed. They arrived the next day with their lawyer, to my house, where my wife's body wasn't even cold yet, where I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't done anything but sit in her chair and smell her perfume on the fabric. And they brought a lawyer. I should have known then, but grief does something to your brain. It puts everything behind a fog, makes the world move like you're underwater. So I let them in. I let them take over the funeral arrangements. I let them make phone calls and coordinate with the mortuary and pick out the casket. Because what did it matter? Margaret was gone. The details felt like nothing. The funeral was on Saturday, 4 days after she died, 4 days that felt like 4 seconds and 4 years at the same time. I stood at the graveside in my suit, the one Margaret had helped me pick out for our anniversary last year, and I watched them lower her into the ground. Michael stood next to me, his hand on my shoulder, squeezing occasionally in what I thought was comfort. I was such a fool. Lisa stood on his other side, dressed in black, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I remember thinking it was nice of her to cry for Margaret, even though they'd never been particularly close. Margaret had tried with Lisa. God knows she tried. Invited her to lunch, asked about her work, sent birthday cards with personal messages. But Lisa always kept her at arm's length, always had this look in her eyes like she was measuring something. Calculating something. Margaret saw it before I did. My wife was sharp like that. She could read people the way I read blueprints. "That girl is waiting for something," she told me once, about 3 years after Michael married Lisa. "She's biding her time." "Waiting for what?" I'd asked. Margaret just looked at me with those clear blue eyes of hers and said, "For us to not matter anymore." I laughed it off then, told her she was being paranoid, that Lisa was just reserved, that not everyone was as warm as Margaret. My wife didn't argue with me. She never did when she knew I wasn't ready to hear something. She just smiled that sad little smile and changed the subject. But she'd been right. God, she'd been so right. The reception after the funeral was at our house. The house Margaret and I built together in 1982, the house where we raised Michael, where we hosted every Christmas and Thanksgiving, where we celebrated every milestone. Lisa insisted on hosting it there. It's what Mom would have wanted, she said, calling Margaret Mom, even though Margaret had told me privately that it made her uncomfortable, that it felt false coming from Lisa's mouth. People came, neighbors, old friends, business associates, from back when I ran the company. They offered condolences, shared memories, told me how much Margaret meant to them. I shook hands and nodded and said thank you over and over until the words lost all meaning. And through it all, I watched Lisa move through my house like she already owned it, rearranging things, directing caterers, playing hostess in Margaret's place. The last guest left around 8 in the evening. I was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that goes bone deep, that makes your soul ache. I wanted everyone gone. I wanted to sit in Margaret's chair and be alone with what was left of her. But Michael and Lisa didn't leave. "Dad, we need to talk," Michael said. Those 5 words. I should have known right then. Nothing good ever comes after, "We need to talk." "Can it wait?" I asked. "I'm tired, son. It's been a long day." "It really can't," Lisa said, and there was something in her voice, something sharp and eager, like a knife coming out of a sheath. "We've put this off long enough out of respect, but there are things that need to be addressed." "What things?" I asked. "Legal things," she said. "Financial things, the house, the company, the inheritance." The inheritance. My wife was in the ground for less than 6 hours, and this woman was talking about the inheritance. "I don't want to discuss this tonight," I said, and I kept my voice level, kept it calm, because that's what Margaret would have wanted. She always said there was more power in stillness than in rage. "We don't have a choice," Lisa said, and she actually sat down on Margaret's favorite armchair, the one by the window where she used to read in the mornings. Lisa sat down like she owned it, crossed her legs, and looked at me with something I can only describe as pity. "The estate is in probate, there are decisions to be made, and frankly, Dad," she called me Dad like it was an insult, "we're not sure you're in the right frame of mind to be making them." "Not in the right frame of mind," I repeated slowly. "My wife died 4 days ago." "Exactly," she said. "Which is why Michael and I think it's best if we take over the financial management for a while, just until you're feeling more yourself." I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man. "Michael," I said, "is this really what you want?" He couldn't look me in the eye. "It's for the best, Dad. You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. Mom's death has been hard on all of us, and we just want to make sure everything is handled properly." "I've been handling things properly for 73 years, I said. "I built a company from nothing. I provided for this family. I think I can manage my own affairs." "The company," Lisa said, and now the knife was fully out, gleaming in the lamplight. "That's actually what we need to discuss. Michael is listed as co-owner, which means legally he has a say in all business decisions, and we've been looking at the books." "You've been looking at the books," I said quietly. "When? When did you do that?" "Does it matter?" she asked. "The point is, the company is hemorrhaging money, has been for years, and with Mom gone, with Margaret gone, there's no reason to keep propping it up. We think the smart move is to sell." Sell. She wanted to sell Callahan Construction, the company I started in 1976 with a truck and a toolbox and a dream. The company Margaret helped me build, doing the books at our kitchen table while nursing Michael, making calls to suppliers, standing by my side through every risk and every reward. The company that put Michael through college, that paid for their wedding, that gave us the life we built together. Lisa wanted to sell it like it was nothing more than a used car. "No," I said. "It's not really your decision alone to make," Lisa said, and now her voice was pure ice. "Michael is co-owner, and as his wife, I have his power of attorney for business decisions. We've already been approached by Hendricks Development Group. They've made a very generous offer." "You've been approached," I said. "You've been negotiating behind my back while my wife was dying." "We've been planning for the future," Lisa corrected, "which is more than you've been doing. Face it, Dad. You're old, you're grieving, you're alone, and this company is all you have left. If you try to run it by yourself, you'll run it into the ground, and then it'll be worth nothing. At least this way you can retire comfortably." Retire comfortably. As if that's all I'd ever wanted, as if the company was just about money and not about legacy, not about purpose, not about the 47 years Margaret and I poured into making it mean something. "Get out," I said. Excuse me? Lisa actually looked surprised, like she'd never considered I might resist. Get out of my house now. Dad, be reasonable. Michael started, get out, and I didn't yell it. That was the thing. I didn't raise my voice at all. I said it cold and flat and final, the way you'd tell a stranger to leave your property. Get out of my house and don't come back until you're ready to apologize. Lisa stood up slowly, smoothing her black dress. We're trying to help you, whether you see it or not. And when you calm down and think about this rationally, you'll realize we're right. The offer from Hendricks is good for 1 week. After that, they're moving on to other opportunities. So you have 7 days to decide if you want to be smart about this or if you want to lose everything out of stubbornness. They left. I watched them get into their Mercedes, the one I'd helped them buy 2 years ago, and drive away down the street Margaret and I had lived on for 43 years. And then I went to her chair, the one Lisa had been sitting in, and I could still smell her there, still feel her presence in the worn fabric. You were right, I said out loud to the empty room. You were right about her. And that's when I cried. Not at the funeral, not at the graveside, not during the reception, but there, alone in our house, talking to the ghost of my wife, I finally broke. But I didn't break the way Lisa thought I would. See, there are 2 kinds of breaking. There's the kind that destroys you, leaves you shattered and useless. And then there's the kind that burns away everything soft and weak, that tempers you in something harder and sharper than you were before. I broke the second way, because here's what Lisa didn't know, what she couldn't have known, what she never bothered to find out. Margaret was smarter than all of them put together. And in the last year of her life, when the cancer was eating away at her body, but her mind was still sharp as a tack, she'd seen this coming. She'd prepared for it. 3 months before she died, Margaret called me into her study, the little room on the second floor where she'd done the company books for decades, where the walls were lined with accounting ledgers and business files and photographs of job sites dating back to the 70s. I need to tell you something, she'd said, and I need you to listen without interrupting, because if I stop, I might not have the courage to start again. I'd sat down across from her, seen how thin she'd gotten, how the disease was hollowing her out from the inside, but her eyes were still fierce, still full of that fire I'd fallen in love with 50 years ago. Lisa is going to try to take everything after I'm gone, Margaret said. She's been positioning herself for years. I've seen the way she looks at this house, at the company, at you. She's waiting for me to die so she can convince Michael to push you out. And Michael, her voice cracked. Michael is too weak to stop her. He loves her more than he loves you, more than he loves the legacy we built. He'll choose her. Margaret, I'd started. Let me finish, she said. I've made arrangements. Legal arrangements. The company, the house, the investments. I've restructured everything, put safeguards in place, but you have to know about them and you have to be willing to use them when the time comes. Can you do that? Can you be ruthless if you need to be? I'd taken her hand then. I felt how fragile it had become. For you, I'd said. For us, yes. She'd smiled then, that beautiful smile that had first made me forget how to speak back in 1972. Good, because I didn't spend 47 years building this life with you just to watch some opportunistic little vulture pick it apart. Now here's what we're going to do. And then she told me about the locked drawer. There's a drawer in my desk, she said, bottom left. I've locked it, and I'm going to hide the key where only you would think to look, where we had our first kiss. You remember? The oak tree in Franklin Park, I said. I planted a sapling from that same tree in our backyard, she said. When you need the evidence, and you will need it, Thomas, dig at the base of that tree. The key will be there. Everything you need to protect us is in that drawer, but don't open it until you're ready to fight, until you're ready to be ruthless. Sitting in her chair a week after I buried her, I thought about that conversation. I thought about the documents she'd shown me, the changes that she'd made to our estate plan, the insurance policies and trusts and legal landmines she'd carefully planted around our entire legacy. Lisa thought I was weak. She thought grief had made me vulnerable. She had no idea that Margaret had spent her last months turning our empire into a fortress, with me as the only one holding the keys. I gave them 3 days of silence while I let them think they'd won, while I let them believe I was sitting alone in my grief, considering their ultimatum. And the truth is, I was grieving. Every moment without Margaret was agony, but grief doesn't mean helpless. It doesn't mean stupid. On the third day, Lisa called. "We haven't heard from you," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "The offer expires in 4 days. We need an answer." "Come to the house tomorrow morning," I said. 9 o'clock. We'll discuss it." I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. You'll see. This is really for the best, for everyone." "Tomorrow morning," I repeated and hung up. They arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. Lisa was dressed for business. A sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back, carrying a leather portfolio that probably contained all the paperwork already drawn up, ready for my signature. Michael was in his usual khakis and button-down, looking uncomfortable, like a child who knows he's done something wrong but isn't sure what yet. I'd been up since 5. I'd showered, shaved, put on my best suit, not the one from the funeral, but the navy one Margaret always said made me look distinguished. I'd made coffee strong and black, and I'd laid out papers of my own on the dining room table, organized in neat stacks, each one a piece of the puzzle Margaret had assembled. "Dad, you look good," Michael said when I opened the door. He sounded relieved, like he'd been worried he'd find me in my bathrobe, unshaven and defeated. "I feel clear-headed," I said. "Come in, coffee's ready." We sat at the dining room table, the same table where we'd had that first terrible conversation a week ago. Lisa settled into her chair like she was preparing for a board meeting. Michael sat next to her, his hand finding hers under the table. "So," Lisa said, "have you thought about the offer?" "I have," I said. "I've thought about it a great deal. In fact, I've thought about very little else." "And?" She leaned forward slightly, eager. "And I'm not selling," I said calmly. "Not to Hendricks, not to anyone. Callahan Construction stays in the family, my family, not yours." Lisa's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "Dad, we've been through this." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You've been through it. You told me what you wanted, what you thought was best, but you didn't ask me. You didn't discuss it with me. You delivered an ultimatum while I was burying my wife, and I'm done pretending that was anything other than what it was, a power grab. That's not fair," Michael said. "We're trying to help." "Help?" I repeated. "Is that what you call it? When you went behind my back to Hendricks Development Group, when you got a valuation on my company without telling me, when you gave them access to our financial records, records that are legally confidential so they could make an offer you'd already decided to accept?" Lisa's face went very still. "We had to be prepared." Prepared for what? For me to die? For me to be too stupid or too grief-stricken to notice you were circling like vultures? "That's not what this is," Lisa said, but her voice had an edge now. "We're being practical. The company is failing. You can't run it alone. And frankly, Michael has as much right to make decisions about it as you do." "Does he?" I asked. "Do you really think that?" "It's a partnership," she said. "Your name and Michael's name are both on the papers." "That's true," I said. Or it was true. Until 2 months ago. I watched the confusion cross her face, watched Michael lean forward slightly. "What do you mean, was true?" he asked. I pulled out the first document from my stack and slid it across the table. In February, Margaret and I restructured the entire ownership of Callahan Construction. With the help of our attorney, our real attorney, not whatever hack you've been using, we established a new corporate structure. Michael, you're no longer a co-owner. You're an employee with a minority stake, 10% to be exact, with no voting rights and no authority to make any business decisions without my explicit written consent. The silence was absolute. Michael picked up the document with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the legal text. You removed me as co-owner without telling me? I didn't remove you, I said quietly. Margaret did, because she saw this coming. She knew that Lisa would push you to do exactly this, and she knew you weren't strong enough to tell her no. So she protected the company, she protected what we built. This is insane, Lisa said, and now her mask was cracking, the cold professionalism giving way to something raw and angry. You can't just change ownership like that. Michael has rights. Michael has exactly the rights that are spelled out in that document, I said, which is a 10% minority stake, a generous salary, and absolutely no authority whatsoever. That's what happens when you try to sell out your father's legacy for a quick payout. You manipulated a dying woman, Lisa hissed. You probably pressured her when she wasn't thinking clearly. Be very careful what you say next, I said, and my voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. Margaret was sharper than you'll ever be, right up until the day she died. She saw you for exactly what you are, Lisa. A leech, an opportunist, someone who married into this family for access to money and status, who never gave a damn about any of us beyond what we could provide for you. How dare you, she started. How dare I? I stood up slowly, placing my hands flat on the table. How dare I call you out for what you did, for circling my wife's deathbed like a vulture, for planning your takeover before she was even in the ground, for bringing a lawyer to my house a week after the funeral to tell me I'm too old and too stupid to run my own company? Dad, please, Michael said weakly. We didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said, looking at my son. You meant every word. Or she did, and you went along with it because you always go along with what Lisa wants. You chose her over your mother, over me, over everything we built for you. I chose my wife, Michael said. That's what you're supposed to do. Not when your wife is trying to steal your inheritance before your father is even in the grave. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take them back. Do you have any idea what your mother did for you? What she sacrificed? She kept the books for this company for 47 years. She raised you alone, half the time because I was on job sites 16 hours a day trying to make sure we didn't lose everything. She went without so you could have, and the moment she's gone, you and your calculating little wife decide it's time to cash out and push me aside. Lisa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor Margaret had picked out in 1985. We're done here. This is clearly emotional and not rational. When you calm down, sit down, I said quietly. Excuse me? Sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. There's a kind of authority that comes from building something with your own hands, from surviving for 7 decades, from loving and losing someone who meant everything. Because we're not done. Not even close. Something in my tone made her hesitate. She looked at Michael, but he was staring at the document in his hands, his face pale. Slowly, she sat back down. I pulled out the second stack of papers. This is the complete financial breakdown of Callahan Construction for the last 10 years. The real numbers, not the ones you got from whatever source you bribed or manipulated into giving them to you. And here's what they show. The company isn't failing. It's thriving. Last year alone, we cleared $2.3 million in profit. This year, we're on track for a $2.7 million. So where exactly is this hemorrhaging money you were so concerned about? Lisa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I'll tell you where, I continued. Nowhere. It was a lie, a manipulation. You wanted me to think the company was worthless, so I'd be grateful for whatever lowball offer Hendricks made. You wanted me scared and desperate. But Margaret taught me better than that. She taught me to always know the real numbers, to never make a decision based on someone else's version of the truth. I slid another document across. This is the offer from Hendricks Development Group, $3 million for the entire company, land, equipment, client contracts, reputation, everything. $3 million. Do you know what this company's actually worth? They stared at me. Based on our assets, our annual revenue, our client relationships, and our reputation in this industry. 8 million, conservatively, on a good day. With the right buyer, maybe 12 million. So you weren't just trying to steal my company, you were trying to steal it for a quarter of what it's worth. And you thought I was too stupid or too grief-stricken to notice. We didn't, Michael started. You did, I said flatly. And here's what really gets me. If you'd just asked, if you'd come to me honestly and said, Dad, we're struggling financially, we need help, I would have helped you. I'm your father. That's what fathers do, but you didn't want help. You wanted everything, and you were willing to destroy what your mother and I built for 50 years to get it. What do you want from us? Lisa asked, and her voice was acid. An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. Michael's sorry. Can we move past this? I looked at her for a long moment, seeing her clearly for the first time, seeing past the mask of the concerned daughter-in-law to the cold calculator underneath. No, I said simply. We can't move past this. Because Margaret didn't just restructure the company, she restructured everything. I pulled out the final stack of documents, the thick one, bound with a black clip that I'd been saving for last. This, I said, is our complete estate plan, the one Margaret and I executed 3 months before she died, and here's what it says. Upon Margaret's death, all assets, the house, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, everything transfer into a revocable trust with me as the sole trustee. Michael, you're listed as the beneficiary to inherit everything when I die, but there's a clause, a very specific clause that Margaret insisted on including. I flipped to the marked page and read aloud. In the event that the beneficiary attempts to challenge the terms of this trust, to manipulate the trustee through coercion or undue influence, or to circumvent the trustee's authority through legal or financial means, the beneficiary shall be immediately removed and replaced with the designated alternate beneficiary. Michael's face went white. What does that mean? It means, I said carefully, that if you try to take any of this from me, if you sue me or challenge my authority, or attempt another power grab like the one you just tried, you lose everything. Margaret made sure of it. She protected our legacy, not just from strangers, but from you, from both of you. Who's the alternate beneficiary? Lisa asked, and I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. The Callahan Family Foundation, I said. A charitable trust Margaret and I established in 1995. Every penny we've ever earned goes to scholarships for kids from working-class families who want to learn a trade. Your mother believed in giving back, Michael. She believed in legacy, and she made damn sure that if you betrayed that legacy, you wouldn't profit from it. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Michael's hands were shaking as he set down the documents. Mom did this? Mom set this up? Your mother, I said quietly, loved you more than anything in this world, but she loved what was right even more. And she knew that Lisa was poisoning you against us, slowly but surely, year after year. She tried to reach you. She tried to warn you, but you couldn't hear her over Lisa's voice in your ear, telling you that we were old and outdated, that our values didn't matter anymore, that the only thing that mattered was money in the bank. Lisa's voice was shrill now. This is financial abuse. You're using your grief to manipulate your son, to turn him against his own wife. I'm using my grief, I said, cutting her off, to honor my wife's final wishes. Everything in these documents, every safeguard, every clause, Margaret put it there. She saw you coming from a mile away, and she made sure that when you finally showed your true colors, we'd be ready. I stood up, gathering the papers back into their stacks. Here's what happens now. Michael, you can keep your position at the company if you want it. Same salary, same benefits, same 10% stake. But you work for me, not with me. And Lisa, you stay the hell away from my business and our finances. You don't get copies of records. You don't get briefings on deals. You don't get anything except what Michael earns through his own work. And if we refuse, Lisa asked, then you're fired, I said simply. And you get nothing. Not the minority stake, not the salary, nothing. You go find another company to work for, another father to betray, but you don't get to profit from what Margaret and I built. Michael looked like he might be sick. Dad, please, can we talk about this? Without all the lawyers and the threats? Talk? I repeated. You want to talk now? Where was this desire to talk when you brought your lawyer to my house a week after the funeral? Where was it when you were negotiating to sell my company behind my back? Where was it when your wife was insulting me in my own home, sitting in your mother's chair, telling me I was too old and stupid to run my own life? I never said, you didn't have to say it, I cut him off. You showed me. Actions, son. Actions always speak louder. And your actions told me everything I needed to know about who you've become. I walked to the front door and opened it. You can show yourselves out. Take the copies of the documents, read them, have your lawyer read them. And when you realize that every word I've said is legally binding and ironclad, you can decide whether you want to accept your 10% and your job, or whether you want to walk away with nothing. Lisa stood up first, snatching her portfolio off the table. This isn't over, she said. Yes, I said quietly. It is? Margaret made sure of it. Michael followed her to the door, but he paused in the doorway, looking back at me with something like heartbreak in his eyes. Did you ever love me? He asked. Or was I just a part of the legacy? The question hit harder than anything Lisa had said. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy who used to sit on my shoulders at job sites, who used to help his mother in the garden, who used to be something other than what he'd become. And I felt something break inside me all over again. I loved you more than my own life, I said. But your mother and I raised you to be better than this. And if you can't see what you've become, if you can't see what she's turned you into, then maybe love isn't enough. They left. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and I was alone in the house again, surrounded by Margaret's things, by the life we'd built, by the silence of her absence. I went back to her chair, the one Lisa had been sitting in, and I could still smell her there, that mixture of lavender and vanilla that had been hers for as long as I could remember. And I let myself cry again, but this time it was different. This time it wasn't just grief, it was anger and betrayal and love, all twisted together into something that tasted like iron in my mouth. I did what you asked, I said to the empty room, to her ghost, to the memory of 47 years together. I used what you gave me. I protected us. And somewhere in the silence, I swear I could feel her hand on my shoulder, her voice in my ear, whispering the same thing she'd said on her deathbed. Don't let them win. Don't let them take what we built. Promise me. I promise, I said aloud. I promise. But even as I said it, even as I felt the rightness of it settle into my bones, I knew this was only the beginning. Lisa wasn't the type to give up just because she'd lost the first round. She'd regroup, find another angle, another pressure point, and I'd have to be ready. Margaret had given me the weapons. Now I had to learn to use them. The war for our legacy had just begun. The Reckoning, fixed version, a Grandpa's revenge story, batch 2, fixed. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence that felt like the calm before a hurricane. I kept working, kept running the company, kept putting one foot in front of the other. But I was waiting, watching, because I knew Lisa wasn't done. Margaret had taught me that about people like her. They don't accept defeat, they just recalibrate, find a new angle, a new weakness. And I knew my weakness. It was the same one it had always been, my son. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, not from Michael or Lisa, but from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Callahan, this is Jennifer Morrison from Child Protective Services. My blood went cold. CPS? I don't understand. We've received a report, she said, her voice professional but not unkind, regarding the welfare of your grandchildren. There are concerns about their living situation and some allegations of instability in the home environment. I'd like to schedule a time to come, speak with you, and assess the situation. My grandchildren: Emma, age 7, Sophie, age 4. Two little girls I'd bounced on my knee, read stories to, taught to ride bikes in my driveway. Two little girls I hadn't seen since the funeral, since that day we planted flowers on Margaret's grave together. 3 weeks ago now. What allegations? I asked, and I could hear the tremor in my own voice. What are you talking about? I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics over the phone, she said. But I can tell you that we take all reports seriously and we need to conduct a full investigation. Are you available tomorrow morning at 10? Yes, I said automatically. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. After she hung up, I sat there, holding the phone, my hand shaking, and then I called the only person I could trust, Gerald Murphy, the attorney who'd helped Margaret set up all the trusts and safeguards, the man who'd known us for 30 years. They're playing dirty, Gerald said after I explained the situation. This is Lisa's doing. She's trying to use the girls as leverage, make you look unstable or dangerous so she can argue you're not fit to make decisions about the estate. But I haven't even seen the girls since the funeral, I said. I haven't done anything. It doesn't matter what you've done, Gerald interrupted. It matters what she can make it look like you've done. A grieving old man living alone in a big house recently had a confrontation with his son, cut him out of the family business. She's building a narrative, and CPS has to investigate every report, no matter how false it is. So what do I do? You cooperate fully, he said. Let them in, show them the house, answer their questions honestly. Don't lose your temper, don't badmouth Michael or Lisa, and for God's sake, don't mention the legal fight over the estate. Keep it simple. You're a grandfather who misses his grandchildren and wants them to be safe and happy. That's not a lie, I said quietly. I do miss them. I know you do, Gerald said, his voice softening. And that's what's going to get you through this. Because unlike Lisa, you actually care about those little girls. It'll show. The CPS worker arrived the next morning at exactly 10 o'clock. Jennifer Morrison was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that didn't quite hide her exhaustion. This job had to be hell, I realized, sorting through lies and truths, trying to protect children while navigating the ugly politics of family warfare. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Callahan, she said as I let her in. I appreciate your cooperation. Call me Thomas, I said, and of course, anything I can do to help. She walked through the house slowly, taking notes. She looked at the photos on the walls, 47 years of family history, from Michael's baby pictures to the girls' latest school photos. She saw Margaret's things still in place, the house kept clean but clearly lived in by someone alone. She looked at the garden. Through the kitchen window, at the swing set I'd built for Emma 3 years ago, now gathering rust. You live here by yourself? She asked. Since my wife passed, I said, 3 weeks ago. I'm very sorry for your loss, she said, and she sounded like she meant it. That must be incredibly difficult. It is, I said simply, because what else was there to say? Mr. Callahan, Thomas, I'm going to be direct with you. The report we received alleges that you've been behaving erratically since your wife's death, that you've made threats toward your son and daughter-in-law, that you've cut them off financially in a fit of grief-fueled anger, and that there are concerns about your mental stability and your ability to maintain a safe environment for your grandchildren when they visit. Each word was a knife. None of that is true, I said carefully. Or rather, the facts are true, but the context is a lie. My wife and I did restructure our estate before she died, but that was her decision as much as mine. And yes, I've had difficult conversations with my son about the family business, but I've never threatened anyone. As for the girls, I haven't seen them since my wife's funeral 3 weeks ago. Not because I don't want to, but because their parents haven't brought them around. Why do you think that is? She asked. I chose my words carefully, remembering Gerald's advice. I think my son and his wife are going through a difficult time. We had a disagreement about business matters, and they're upset with me. But that has nothing to do with Emma and Sophie. Those girls are my heart. I would never do anything to put them at risk. Jennifer made notes, her expression neutral. Has there been any conflict in front of the children? Any arguments they might have witnessed? The last time I saw them was at their grandmother's funeral, I said. They helped me plant flowers on her grave. We talked about how Grandma was watching over them from heaven. We ate ice cream. I told them stories about when their dad was little. That was the last time I held them. My voice broke on the last sentence. I couldn't help it. The thought of Emma and Sophie being used as weapons in this fight, of Lisa poisoning them against me the way she'd poisoned Michael, it was too much. Jennifer's expression softened. I can see this is painful for you, and for what it's worth, nothing I've seen here suggests an unsafe environment. But I do need to ask, are you seeing anyone? A therapist? Someone to help you process your grief? I haven't, I admitted. I probably should. I've just been focused on work, on keeping the business running. It's what Margaret would have wanted. Grief can do strange things to people, she said gently. And there's no shame in needing help to process it. In fact, it might be beneficial for you and for your case to start seeing someone, to document that you're taking care of your mental health. I understood what she was really saying. Cover your ass. Make it harder for Lisa to paint you as unstable. I'll look into it, I said. Today? She stood up, gathering her papers. I'm going to file a report that I found no evidence of an unsafe environment or concerning behavior. But, Thomas, I need to be honest with you. Whoever filed this report isn't going to stop here. This feels like part of a larger conflict, and children should never be used as leverage in adult disputes. If there are ongoing issues with your son and daughter-in-law, I strongly encourage you to seek mediation or family counseling. Thank you, I said. I appreciate your honesty. After she left, I called Gerald back. She's going to file a favorable report, I said, but you were right, this isn't over. No, Gerald agreed, this is just opening salvos. Lisa is testing your defenses, seeing where you're vulnerable. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What was I going to do? That night, I sat in Margaret's study, surrounded by her meticulous files and records, and I realized something. I'd been playing defense, reacting to Lisa's moves instead of making my own. And Margaret hadn't raised me to be defensive. She'd taught me that the best defense was an offense so overwhelming that your opponent never got a chance to strike. I started going through the files more carefully, really digging into what Margaret had left me. And that's when I remembered. The locked drawer. Margaret had told me about it before she died, told me exactly where to find the key, but in my grief, I'd forgotten. Or maybe I'd been too afraid to look, too afraid of what I'd find. I went out in the dark with a flashlight and dug around the base of the oak tree Margaret had planted, our private memorial to where it all began. My fingers hit something metal, a small key in a waterproof container exactly where she'd said it would be. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside was a single manila folder labeled insurance. At first, I thought it was just policy documents. Life insurance, home insurance, the usual. But as I started reading, I realized what Margaret had really left me: ammunition. She'd kept records, detailed, meticulous records spanning the last 5 years of Lisa's behavior. Receipts from luxury purchases made on the company credit card, the one Lisa had somehow gotten access to through Michael. Emails between Lisa and various lawyers dating back 3 years discussing estate planning and asset distribution. Text messages between Lisa and her friends, screenshot and saved, where she talked openly about waiting for the old bitch to die so we can finally live our lives. The old bitch. That's what she'd called Margaret. My wife, who'd never been anything but gracious to this woman, who'd welcomed her into our family with open arms, the old bitch. I read through everything, my hands shaking with rage. There were bank statements showing transfers from Michael's account to Lisa's parents, large transfers, tens of thousands of dollars, money that had ultimately come from the company profits. There were credit card bills for trips to Vegas, designer clothes, a sports car Lisa had bought and registered in her maiden name so it wouldn't show up in their joint assets. And then at the very bottom of the pile, there was a private investigator's report. Margaret had hired someone. 6 months before she died, she'd hired a PI to follow Lisa to document her activities, to find out what she was really doing with her time and our money. And what he'd found was damning. Lisa had been having an affair. For almost 2 years, she'd been meeting with a man named Derek Sutton, a commercial real estate developer married with 3 kids of his own. The PI had photos. Lisa and Derek entering hotels, kissing in parking garages, having intimate dinners at restaurants 2 towns over where they thought no one would recognize them. But it got worse. The PI had also dug into Derek's business dealings and found connections to Hendricks Development Group, the same company that had made the lowball offer for Callahan Construction. Derek Sutton was on their board of directors. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about inheritance. Lisa had been planning this for years, positioning herself to profit from the company's sale. She'd probably gotten Derek to convince Hendricks to make an offer, had probably promised him a cut of whatever she and Michael received. This wasn't family business. This was a conspiracy, and Michael had no idea. Looking at the dates, reading through the evidence, I could see that my son was just a pawn, a useful idiot who Lisa kept in line with affection and sex and the promise of a better life once the old people were out of the way. He thought he was protecting his marriage, but his marriage was a sham, a transaction. I thought about calling him right then, showing him everything, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of how he'd looked at me during that confrontation, the way he'd chosen her over everything we'd taught him. Or maybe it was something colder, something harder, the recognition that Margaret had given me this information for a reason, and that reason wasn't to save Michael's marriage. It was to destroy Lisa completely. I made copies of everything, took the originals to Gerald's office the next morning in a locked briefcase. Jesus Christ, he said after reading through the first 10 pages. Margaret found all this? She knew. I said she knew exactly what Lisa was, and she made sure I'd have everything I needed to prove it. This changes everything, Gerald said, leaning back in his chair. The affair, the fraud, the conspiracy with Hendricks, Thomas. With this evidence, we can not only defend against any claims Lisa makes, we can go on the offensive. We can destroy her. I want to do more than destroy her, I said quietly. I want to make sure she never does this to anyone else. I want her exposed, humiliated, and broke. I want her to lose everything she schemed for. Everything. Gerald looked at me for a long moment. This isn't you talking, he said carefully. This is the grief, the anger. This is Margaret talking. I interrupted. She left me these files for a reason. She spent the last months of her life gathering evidence because she knew I'd need it, because she knew I'd have to be the one to finish what she started, and I'm not going to let her down. Okay, Gerald said, finally. Okay, but we need to be strategic about this. We can't just dump all this information at once. We need to use it carefully, piece by piece, to corner Lisa and make sure she can't wiggle out of the consequences. Tell me what to do, I said. First, Gerald said, we wait for her next move, because she's going to make one. The CPS thing didn't work, so she's going to try something else. And when she does, we hit back twice as hard. We let her think she's winning, and then we pull the rug out from under her. How long do we wait? Not long, he said. Someone like Lisa can't help themselves. They always overplay their hand. He was, right? The next move came less than a week later, but it wasn't from Lisa directly. It was from Michael. He showed up at the house on a Saturday morning alone. I saw him through the window, sitting in his car in the driveway for almost 10 minutes before he finally got out and walked to the door. He looked terrible, thinner than I'd ever seen him. Dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled. I opened the door before he could knock. "Dad?" he said. His voice cracked on the word. "Come in," I said. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd had so many conversations over the years, where I'd taught him to tie his shoes, where we'd watched football games together, where he'd told me he was going to propose to Lisa, and I'd smiled and hugged him and told him I was happy for him, even as Margaret squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Lisa doesn't know I'm here," he said finally. "She thinks I'm at the gym." "Why are you here?" I asked. "I need to know if it's true," he said. "What you said about Mom, about her setting up all those trusts and restrictions. Did she really do that? Did she really think I was going to betray you?" "Yes," I said simply. "She did, and she was right." He flinched like I'd hit him. "I wasn't trying to betray you. I was trying to help." "Help who, Michael? Because it sure as hell wasn't me. You tried to sell my company out from under me for a quarter of what it's worth. You brought a lawyer to my house while I was burying your mother. You let your wife call me too old and stupid to run my own life. So tell me, who exactly were you trying to help?" "Lisa said," he started. "I don't care what Lisa said," I cut him off. "I care what you did, and what you did was choose her over your own mother's dying wishes, over your father, over the legacy we built for you. So, yes, your mother saw it coming, and she made sure you'd pay for it if you went through with it." "I loved her," Michael said, and tears were running down his face now. "I love Mom. I never wanted to hurt her." "Then why did you?" I asked. "Why did you let Lisa poison you against us? Why did you believe her lies about the company failing? Why didn't you come to me, talk to me, instead of sneaking around behind my back trying to engineer a takeover?" "Because I thought you wouldn't listen," he said. "Because you and Mom always knew better, always had everything figured out. And Lisa, she made me feel like I mattered, like my opinion counted for something." "Your opinion did count," I said. "It always counted, but you wanted more than that. You wanted control. You wanted to be the one making decisions, even when you didn't have the experience or the judgment to make them. And Lisa fed that ego, made you think you deserved power you hadn't earned." "Maybe that's true," he said quietly. "Maybe I let her manipulate me, but Dad, I'm still your son. Doesn't that count for something?" It was the same question he'd asked before. Did I ever love you? Or were you just part of the legacy? And looking at him now, this broken, confused man who used to be my little boy, I felt my heart crack open all over again. "Of course it counts," I said, my voice rough. "You're my son. You'll always be my son, but that doesn't mean I can trust you anymore. It doesn't mean I can let you destroy what your mother and I spent our lives building. Love and trust aren't the same thing, Michael, and you broke my trust the moment you chose Lisa's greed over your mother's wisdom." "I can fix this," he said desperately. "I can make this right. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it." This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the opening I needed, but I had to be careful. I had to make sure he meant it, that this wasn't just another manipulation. "Do you know what your wife has been doing?" I asked. "Really doing?" "What do you mean?" "I mean the affair," I said. I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign that he already knew that this was part of some larger scheme, but all I saw was confusion. "What affair?" he asked. "Sit down, Michael," I said quietly. "There are things you need to know. Things your mother found out before she died. Things she left for me because she knew you'd need to see them eventually." I went to my office and came back with a slim folder. Not everything Margaret had left me, but enough. The photos of Lisa and Derek Sutton. The financial records showing the embezzlement, the email trail connecting Derek to Hendrick's development. Michael's hands shook as he looked through the pages. I watched his face cycle through emotions, disbelief, denial, anger, devastation. It was like watching him age 10 years in 10 minutes. How long? He finally asked. How long did Mom know? 6 months before she died, I said. She hired a private investigator because she knew something was wrong. She saw the way Lisa looked at you, the way she talked about our money like it was already hers. And she found all of this. Why didn't she tell me? His voice was barely a whisper. Because she knew you wouldn't believe her, I said. Because you were so deep under Lisa's spell that any criticism of her looked like jealousy or manipulation. So she did the only thing she could. She protected our legacy legally, and she left me the evidence so I could show you when you were ready to see it. I'm such an idiot, he said. I'm such a goddamn idiot. Yes, I said. There was no point in softening it. You are. You married a woman who never loved you, who was only interested in what you could provide for her. And when she realized she couldn't get it through you alone, she found someone else who could help her take it. You were never her husband, Michael. You were her mark. He put his head in his hands and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. And I sat there watching my son fall apart, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and pain. Because he needed to fall apart. He needed to see exactly what he'd done, what he'd chosen, what he'd lost. But I also needed to be careful. Michael was broken right now, but broken things can be manipulated. I needed to make sure this was real, that he wouldn't run back to Lisa the moment things got hard. After a while, he looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What do I do now? That depends, I said. What do you want? I want out, he said. I want away from her. I want to fix things with you, if that's even possible. His voice broke. I want my mom back, but I can't have that. So I want to make sure her legacy is protected, the way she wanted it protected. Words are easy, Michael, I said. Lisa's been feeding you words for years. I need to know you mean this. I need to know you won't go back to her the moment she smiles at you or tells you she's sorry. I won't, he said. I swear, Dad, I won't. Then prove it, I said. Go home tonight. Act normal. Don't tell her about this conversation. Don't let on that anything's changed, and tomorrow you think about what you really want, because once you make this choice, there's no going back. You divorce Lisa, you testify against her if needed, you accept whatever role I'm willing to give you in the company, and you do it all knowing that you're doing it because it's right, not because you want something from me. I understand, he said. Do you? I asked, because this isn't just about leaving her. This is about admitting that you were wrong, that Mom was right, that you betrayed everything we taught you. Can you do that? Can you live with that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I've been living with it every day since Mom died. Every time I look at Emma and Sophie, I think about what I tried to do, what I almost destroyed. So yes, I can live with admitting I was wrong because it's the truth. Then go home, I said. Think about it and come back tomorrow if you still feel the same way. After he left, I called Gerald. Michael came by, I said. He saw the evidence. And, Gerald asked, and he's devastated. But I'm not sure yet if he's ready. I told him to go home, think about it, and come back tomorrow. That's smart, Gerald said. Give him time to process. If he comes back, we'll know he's serious. If he doesn't, or if he warns Lisa, then we'll know he chose her again. And if he warns her, I asked, then we move forward anyway, Gerald said. We have the evidence. We don't need Michael's cooperation, though it would make things easier. But Thomas, if he does come back, if he does choose to stand with you, you need to be ready to forgive him eventually. Not right away, but eventually, because that's what Margaret would have wanted. I know, I said. I just don't know if I can. You will, Gerald said. When the time is right, you will. That night, I sat in Margaret's chair and wondered if I'd done the right thing. Sending Michael home, giving him time to think, it was a risk. He could warn Lisa. He could go back to her. He could choose her all over again. But Margaret had taught me that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can only give them the truth and hope they're strong enough to face it. Tomorrow, I'd know which kind of man my son really was. Tomorrow, I'd know if Margaret's faith in him, buried deep beneath her disappointment, had been justified. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. The Reckoning, fixed version. Grandpa's Revenge Story. Batch 3, final, fixed. Michael came back the next morning. I saw him pull into the driveway at 7 o'clock before the sun had fully risen. He sat in his car for a few minutes, and I wondered if he was gathering courage or making one last decision. Then he got out, walked to the door, and knocked. When I opened it, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Resolve. "I'm ready," he said. "Tell me what to do." I let him in, made coffee, and we sat at that same dining room table where this had all started, where Lisa had tried to take everything, where Margaret's plans had first been revealed. "Are you sure?" I asked, because once we start this, Lisa is going to fight back with everything she has. She's going to say terrible things about you, about me, about your mother. She's going to try to use the girls against you, and it's going to get ugly before it gets better. "I know," Michael said. "I went home last night and I watched her, really watched her, the way she talked about the girls like they were assets, the way she was already planning her next move against you. And I realized Mom was right. Lisa never loved me. She loved what I could give her. And I've wasted 10 years of my life on someone who saw me as nothing more than a meal ticket." "Then you divorce her?" I said. "You file the papers this week. You use this evidence to make sure she doesn't get a penny in the settlement. And you accept whatever role I'm willing to give you in the company with gratitude and humility, knowing that you don't deserve even that much after what you've done." "Okay," he said immediately. "Okay, I'll do it." "I'm not finished," I said. "You also testify, if needed, about Lisa's plans to defraud the company. You cooperate fully with any investigation into her embezzlement. You make this right, Michael, no matter what it costs you, no matter how ugly it gets. Can you do that?" He looked at the photos again, at the image of his wife kissing another man in a hotel parking lot, at the financial records showing how she'd been stealing from us for years, at the evidence of a conspiracy that had used him as a pawn. "Yes," he said, "I can do that." "Then we have an understanding," I said. I stood up, went to my office, and came back with a single document. "This is a preliminary divorce agreement. Gerald drew it up based on the evidence we have. It gives Lisa nothing, no alimony, no share of assets, limited parental rights with supervised visitation. It exposes her affair, her fraud, and her conspiracy. And it makes clear that if she fights it, we'll file criminal charges for embezzlement." Michael took the paper with shaking hands. "When do I give this to her?" "Tomorrow morning," I said. "I want you to spend today getting your affairs in order. Move your personal documents out of the house. Set up a separate bank account. Talk to Emma and Sophie, age appropriately, about the fact that you and Mommy are having problems, and then tomorrow morning you hand her these papers and you tell her it's over. Gerald will have a process server there to make it official, and then you pack a bag and you come back here, to this house, until we figure out what happens next." "The girls," he started. "Will be fine," I said. "Lisa's not going to hurt them. She needs them too much. They're her only leverage left, but we'll file for emergency custody based on the evidence of her instability and fraud. Gerald says we have a strong case." "This is really happening," Michael said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "This is really happening," I confirmed. "Your mother set all this in motion before she died because she knew it would have to happen. And now it's time to finish what she started." He stood up slowly, still holding the divorce papers. "Dad, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but do you think you can ever forgive me for what I did to you and Mom? I looked at my son, really looked at him, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he used to be. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I'm too angry and too hurt to even think about forgiveness. But maybe someday. If you prove that you've learned from this, if you show me that you're the man your mother raised you to be, not the weak fool Lisa turned you into, I'll prove it, he said. I promise. I'll make this right. Michael served Lisa with the divorce papers at 8:30 the next morning. I know because he called me at 8:32, his voice shaking so badly I could barely understand him. It's done, he said. I gave them to her. How did she react? I asked. She laughed, he said, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice. She actually laughed. She said I was bluffing, that I'd never go through with it, that I needed her. And then I showed her the photos, the evidence, everything. And then she stopped laughing. His voice went cold. She called me every name you can imagine. Said I was pathetic, said she'd destroy me in court, said she'd take the girls and make sure I never saw them again. And then she said, he paused, his breath hitching. She said Mom was a dried up old bitch who died because even her own body was tired of keeping her alive. She said she was glad Mom was dead because it meant she didn't have to pretend anymore. I felt something snap inside me, some last thread of mercy or restraint that might have held me back. Where is she now? She left, grabbed her purse and her phone and stormed out. The process server tried to give her the official papers, but she knocked them out of his hands. He had to leave them on the floor. Legal service completed, Gerald said. Good, I said. Let her run. Let her think she can outmaneuver this. It'll make what comes next even sweeter. What does come next? Michael asked. Justice, I said simply. The kind your mother spent her last days arranging. You just stay at the house. Keep the girls safe, and let me handle the rest. Lisa's first move was predictable. She called her lawyer. Within an hour of receiving the divorce papers, she had filed an emergency motion for full custody of Emma and Sophie, claiming that Michael was having a mental breakdown and that I was a dangerous influence on the family. She requested a restraining order against both of us, preventing any contact with the children until a full psychiatric evaluation could be completed. Gerald had been waiting for exactly this. She's panicking, he said when he called to tell me about the motion. She's trying to use the nuclear option before we can establish our case. But here's the beautiful part. In her filing, she claimed that all allegations of infidelity and fraud are baseless and defamatory. She's denying everything on the record. Which means when we prove it, she's also guilty of perjury, I said. Exactly. She just handed us another crime to charge her with. I almost want to send her a thank you card. He paused. And Thomas, there's something else. Lisa's lawyer also filed a counter-complaint with CPS, trying to escalate the original report. But I've already contacted them with our evidence of her fraud and affair. Between Jennifer Morrison's favorable report on you and this new information about Lisa's criminal activity, CPS is closing their investigation into you and opening one into her household stability. So she's attacking on all fronts, I said, and losing on all fronts, Gerald confirmed. She's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. 3 days for Lisa to prepare her defense, to try to spin the narrative, to convince a judge that she was the victim in all of this. 3 days for me to watch my son hold his daughters and explain that Mommy was having a difficult time, but everything would be okay. 3 days to sit in Margaret's chair and feel the weight of what we were about to do. Emma asked me about her grandmother the night before the hearing. We were in the backyard, and she was pushing Sophie on the swing I'd built, and she just turned to me and said, Grandpa, is Grandma watching us from heaven? Every second, I told her. She's always watching, making sure you're safe. I miss her, Emma said, and her little voice cracked. Mommy says Grandma was mean to her. Is that true? I knelt down so I was eye level with my granddaughter, this 7-year-old child who'd been caught in the middle of a war she didn't understand. Your grandma was the kindest person I ever knew, I said carefully. But sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, and sometimes when people are upset about those disagreements, they say things that aren't quite true. Do you understand? I think so, she said. It's like when Sophie says I'm being mean when I don't let her play with my toys. I'm not being mean. I'm just protecting my stuff. Out of the mouths of babes. Exactly like that, I said. Sometimes people confuse protecting something important with being mean. Are you protecting something important now? She asked. Yes, I said. I'm protecting you and Sophie and your dad, and I'm protecting what Grandma and I built together, because that's what grandmas and grandpas do. She hugged me, then her small arms around my neck, and I thought about Margaret, about how she'd held this same little girl as a baby, how she'd read her stories and taught her to plant flowers and loved her with every fiber of her being. And I thought about Lisa, who'd just called Margaret a dried-up old bitch, who was trying to use these children as weapons, who saw them not as people, but as leverage. No mercy, I thought, for Margaret, for the girls, for everything Lisa tried to destroy. No mercy at all? The hearing was in family court, a gray institutional building that smelled like desperation and broken promises. Lisa arrived with her lawyer, some slick downtown type in a $1,000 suit who looked like he ate nice old men for breakfast. She was dressed conservatively, makeup minimal, playing the part of the concerned mother protecting her children from unstable relatives. Michael and I sat on the opposite side with Gerald. Michael looked like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably true. I'd heard him pacing the halls of my house at 3 a.m, heard him crying in the guest room that used to be his childhood bedroom. Lisa wouldn't even look at us. She kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, her expression carefully neutral. But I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the table. She was nervous. Good. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Patricia Hernandez. Gerald had told me about her. Tough but fair. Not easily swayed by emotion, focused on facts and evidence. She'd been on the bench for 20 years and had seen every trick in the book. I've reviewed the emergency motion, Judge Hernandez said after we were all seated. Mrs. Callahan, your filing claims that your husband and father-in-law pose a danger to your children. Can you elaborate on the specific nature of this danger? Lisa's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client's husband has recently undergone a severe personality change following his mother's death. He's made wild accusations against Mrs. Callahan, has removed her from all family financial accounts without justification, and has aligned himself with his father, who has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, including confrontational episodes and threats. What threats specifically? The judge asked. Mr. Callahan Sr. told my client that she would lose everything if she didn't comply with his demands regarding the family business. He's using financial coercion to control the family dynamic and has influenced his son to the point where Mr. Callahan Jr. is no longer capable of making rational decisions about his marriage or his children. It was a good performance. I had to give Lisa's lawyer credit. He knew how to paint a picture. But Gerald was better. Your Honor, Gerald stood smoothly. Everything the opposing counsel just described is taken out of context to create a false narrative. My client, Thomas Callahan, is a 73-year-old man who lost his wife of 47 years less than a month ago. In his grief, he discovered that his daughter-in-law had been systematically embezzling from the family business, had engaged in an extramarital affair for nearly 2 years, and had conspired with her paramour to defraud the Callahan family of millions of dollars through an undervalued sale of the family company. The courtroom went silent. Lisa's lawyer's confident expression flickered. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Murphy, Judge Hernandez said. I assume you have evidence to support it. Substantial evidence, Your Honor, financial records, photographs, email correspondence, and witness testimony. We have documentation showing that Mrs. Callahan used company credit cards for personal expenses totaling over $150,000. We have photographic evidence of her affair with Derek Sutton, a board member of Hendricks Development Group, the same company that made a lowball offer to purchase Callahan Construction. And we have email chains showing coordination between Mrs. Callahan and Mr. Sutton regarding this offer, suggesting conspiracy to defraud. Gerald placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. This is a complete dossier of evidence, Your Honor, and I should note that Mrs. Callahan, in her emergency filing, categorically denied all allegations of infidelity and fraud. If the evidence supports our claims, which it does, then she has also committed perjury in her filing with this court. Your Honor, Lisa's lawyer interjected quickly. We haven't had the opportunity to review this so-called evidence. This is ambush tactics, presenting unverified documents without proper discovery. The documents are verified, Counselor, Gerald said calmly. Bank statements, credit card receipts, photographic evidence from a licensed private investigator, all obtained legally and all admissible. Would you like us to go through proper discovery? That's fine. But then we'll need to postpone this emergency hearing, which means your client's request for a restraining order is denied pending full review. Lisa leaned over and whispered urgently to her lawyer. I could see the calculation in her eyes. Delay meant losing the restraining order, losing the leverage of keeping Michael from the girls. We'll proceed, her lawyer said stiffly. Judge Hernandez opened the folder and began reading. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of pages turning. I watched Lisa's face. She was trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks forming. Her lawyer was whispering to her, probably telling her to stay calm, not to react. After what felt like an eternity, the judge looked up. Mrs. Callahan, these photographs appear to show you in intimate situations with a man who is not your husband. Can you explain these images? They're taken out of context, Lisa said, her voice tight. Derek Sutton is a business associate. We've had meetings. At hotels? The judge asked. At restaurants 2 towns over? In parking garages? Your Honor, without being able to verify the authenticity of these photos, Lisa's lawyer tried. The metadata is included, Counselor, Gerald said. Dates, times, locations, all verified by the private investigator who took them. We can provide his testimony if needed. Mrs. Callahan, Judge Hernandez said, her voice hardening, I'm going to ask you directly, and I remind you that you're under oath. Did you engage in an extramarital relationship with Derek Sutton? The courtroom went completely silent. I watched Lisa's face cycle through emotions, panic, calculation, defiance. She looked at her lawyer, who gave her a small shake of his head, warning her not to lie. Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess to confer with my client. The lawyer started. Denied, the judge said. Mrs. Callahan, answer the question. Lisa's hands were shaking now. It's complicated. Yes or no, Mrs. Callahan? Another long pause, then barely audible, yes. The judge's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room. And did you use company credit cards for personal expenses without authorization? Lisa's lawyer put his hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Those were business expenses. $150,000 at luxury retailers, casinos, and vacation resorts? Gerald interjected. All while the company was supposedly failing and needed to be sold? Mrs. Callahan, the judge said sharply, I'm losing patience. Did you or did you not use company funds for unauthorized personal expenses? I watched her realize that this was the moment where the truth came out or she buried herself deeper in lies, and I watched her make the wrong choice. I was entitled to that money, she said. her voice rising. I worked for that company. Michael worked for that company. We deserved compensation. So that's a yes, the judge said flatly. You don't understand, Lisa continued, and now everything was pouring out, just like Gerald had predicted. They never valued us. Thomas and Margaret, they ran that company like it was theirs alone, like Michael was just an employee instead of a co-owner. Margaret controlled everything, the books, the money, the decisions. She never respected me, never. Thought I was good enough for her precious son. And when I tried to secure our future, when I tried to make sure we got what we deserved, she turned Michael against me. She spent her last months poisoning them both. Mrs. Callahan, the judge said warningly, I strongly suggest you stop talking. But Lisa couldn't stop. It was like watching a dam burst. She was a manipulative, controlling woman who tried to control everyone around her, even from her deathbed, setting up trusts and restrictions, gathering evidence against me like I was some kind of criminal instead of family. And now they're using her paranoid delusions to try to take my children, my marriage, everything I've worked for. Enough, Judge Hernandez said, her voice cutting through Lisa's rant like a knife. Mrs. Callahan, you've just admitted under oath to infidelity and unauthorized use of company funds. You've also made it very clear that you view your marriage and family as financial assets rather than relationships, and your complete lack of self-awareness about your own behavior is deeply concerning. She turned to Lisa's lawyer. Counselor, do you have any actual defense to present, or is your client going to continue incriminating herself? The lawyer looked defeated. Your Honor, we'd like to request time to review the evidence and prepare a proper response. Request denied, the judge said. Mrs. Callahan has admitted to the key allegations under oath. Based on these admissions and the evidence presented, I'm denying the emergency custody motion. Furthermore, I'm granting temporary full custody to the father, Michael Callahan, with supervised visitation only for the mother pending a full custody evaluation. Your Honor, please. Lisa's voice was desperate now. You can't take my children. I'm not finished, the judge continued. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the embezzlement and fraud allegations. Mrs. Callahan, you have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise that right before you incriminate yourself further. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Lisa sat there in shock for a moment, and then she turned to look at me. The mask was completely gone now. What I saw in her eyes was pure hatred, raw and undisguised. You did this, she hissed. You poisoned him against me. You and that dead bitch. Bailiff, the judge said sharply. Please escort Mrs. Callahan from the courtroom. As they led her away, still cursing and screaming, Michael turned to me. Is it really over? He asked. Not yet, I said, but we're close. The district attorney moved fast. Within a week, they'd charged Lisa with embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and perjury. The evidence Margaret had gathered made their case airtight. Lisa's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA wasn't interested. This was a high-profile case involving a well-respected local business, and they wanted to make an example. Derek Sutton was also charged as a co-conspirator. And here's where it got interesting. Derek's wife, upon learning of the affair and the conspiracy, filed for divorce and threatened to expose several other affairs Derek had been having over the years. She also had evidence that Derek had been embezzling from his own company to fund his lifestyle and his schemes with Lisa. Facing potential federal charges for his own fraud, Derek quickly took a plea deal from the DA. In exchange for a reduced sentence and avoiding federal prosecution, he agreed to testify against Lisa, providing full details of their conspiracy, including emails, text messages, and recordings of their planning sessions. His position on the Hendricks Development Group board was terminated the day after his arrest. Within 48 hours, Hendricks issued a public statement claiming they had no knowledge of any conspiracy and were withdrawing all offers to purchase Callahan Construction. They claimed Derek had acted alone and without board authorization, a transparent attempt to distance themselves from the scandal. Gerald laughed when he saw the statement. They're terrified, he said. They know if this goes to trial, their due diligence process will be scrutinized. The fact that they made an offer based on fraudulent information from a board member makes them look incompetent at best, complicit at worst. And suddenly Derek was a lot less interested in protecting Lisa. His carefully maintained life, the wealthy developer with the perfect family, was in ruins, and he was desperate to save whatever he could. The trial took 3 months to prepare, 3 months during which Michael and I worked to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy. Trust, once shattered, doesn't heal overnight. But slowly, day by day, we found our way back to something that resembled a father-son relationship. He moved into the house permanently, bringing Emma and Sophie with him. We established routines, breakfast together every morning, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories in the room that used to be his. The girls adjusted better than I'd expected. Kids are resilient like that. Michael went back to work at Callahan Construction, but this time in a different role, not as an owner or a decision maker, but as someone learning the business from the ground up. He worked on job sites, operated equipment, did the grunt work he'd always been too good for when he thought he was entitled to an executive position. I should have done this years ago, he told me one night over dinner. Started at the bottom. Earned it instead of expecting it to be handed to me. Your mother tried to tell you, I said. She believed in earning what you have, in respecting the work. I know, he said quietly. I know, and I didn't listen. I thought she was just being old-fashioned, but she was right. About everything, about Lisa, about me, about, what matters. She usually was, I said, and for the first time in months, I smiled. The trial started on a cold Monday in November. I sat in the courtroom every single day, watching as Gerald and the prosecution systematically destroyed Lisa's defense. They presented the financial records showing the embezzlement. They showed the photos of the affair. They brought in witnesses, employees who'd seen Lisa's behavior, accountants who testified about the missing funds, the private investigator who documented everything. Derek Sutton was called as a witness for the prosecution as part of his plea deal. He testified that Lisa had approached him about the scheme, that she'd initiated the affair specifically to gain access to his connections at Hendricks, that the entire relationship had been a calculated effort to position herself for the company's sale. He provided emails showing how they'd coordinated the lowball offer, how Lisa had promised him 20% of whatever she and Michael received from the sale. I watched Lisa's face as her ex-lover testified against her, watched her realize that everyone she'd manipulated, everyone she'd used, was abandoning her now that she had nothing left to offer them. There's a special kind of justice in watching someone reap what they've sown. The defense tried to paint Lisa as a victim, a woman married into a controlling family, manipulated by older men, forced into desperate measures to secure her independence. But it rang hollow when confronted with the evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. I didn't have to be there, but I wanted to be, needed to be, because Margaret couldn't be there herself, and someone needed to represent what Lisa had tried to destroy. The judge, a different judge this time for the criminal trial, asked if anyone wanted to make a victim impact statement before sentencing. Michael declined, but I stood up. Your Honor, I said, My name is Thomas Callahan. Lisa Callahan was married to my son for 10 years. In that time, she was welcomed into our family, given every opportunity to be part of something meaningful, something that had been built over nearly 50 years of hard work and sacrifice. I looked at Lisa sitting at the defense table in her orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, all the polish and pretension stripped away. My wife, Margaret, saw what Lisa was before any of the rest of us did. She saw the calculation, the greed, the complete absence of genuine affection for our family. And in the last months of her life, while she was dying of cancer, she used what strength she had left to protect what we'd built. She gathered evidence, she restructured our assets, she made sure that even after she was gone, Lisa couldn't destroy the legacy we'd spent our lives creating. My voice broke slightly. I couldn't help it. Margaret died, believing that justice would be served, that her son would eventually see the truth, that the family business would survive. And standing here today, seeing Lisa being held accountable for what she did, I know that my wife's final gift to me was the tools I needed to make sure her faith was justified. I turned back to the judge. Hey, Lisa didn't just steal money, Your Honor. She tried to steal meaning. She tried to reduce 50 years of marriage, of partnership, of building something together down to just numbers in a bank account. She thought love and loyalty and legacy could be bought and sold like any other commodity. And she was wrong. The sentence you give her today won't bring my wife back. It won't undo the damage she did to my son and my grandchildren, but it will send a message that some things matter more than money. Some things can't be stolen. Some legacies can't be destroyed, no matter how hard someone tries. I sat back down. Michael reached over and squeezed my hand. The judge sentenced Lisa to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5. She was also ordered to pay full restitution for the embezzled funds, plus damages. Not that she had any money left to pay it. Her legal fees had consumed everything, and what little she had was seized by the court. As they led her away, Lisa looked at me one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly. "You destroyed my life." "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed your own life. We just made sure you faced the consequences." And then she was gone, and it was over. Not really over, of course. Healing takes time. Trust takes time. The girls needed therapy to process everything. We found them a wonderful counselor who specialized in helping children cope with parental incarceration and divorce. Emma struggled at first, asking questions about why mommy had to go away, but slowly she began to understand that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices and have to face consequences. Michael needed years to fully understand and come to terms with how badly he'd been manipulated. But he did the work. He went to therapy. He rebuilt his relationship with his daughters. He learned the business from the ground up. And slowly, very slowly, I began to trust him again. But standing outside that courtroom with my son beside me and my granddaughters waiting at home with their favorite babysitter, I felt something I hadn't felt since Margaret died. Peace. We went to her grave that evening, all 4 of us. The headstone had been installed the week before. Simple black granite with her name, her dates, and the inscription I'd chosen. She built a legacy of love and protected it with wisdom. Emma placed flowers on the grave, carefully arranging them the way Margaret had taught her. Sophie, too young to fully understand death, just sat on the grass and played with a stuffed rabbit Margaret had given her last Christmas. Michael knelt by the headstone, his hand flat against the cold granite. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't listen. I'm sorry I let you down, but I'm going to make it right. I promise." I placed my hand on his shoulder, and we stood there together, father and son, while the November wind rustled through the trees Margaret had loved. "She knows," I said. "She always knew you'd find your way back. That's why she fought so hard. That's why she made sure we'd have what we needed to survive this. We stood there until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Margaret would have loved. And then we went home to the house Margaret and I had built, where our grandchildren would grow up learning the values she'd lived by, where the legacy she'd protected would continue for another generation. That night, after the girls were in bed and Michael had retreated to his room, I sat in Margaret's chair by the window. Her reading glasses were still on the side table where she'd left them. Her bookmarks still held her place in the novel she'd never finished, small remnants of a life fully lived. I picked up the notebook she'd kept in her last months, the one where she'd planned everything, where she'd outlined every step of the legal protections she was putting in place. On the last page, she'd written a note to me, in her careful, elegant handwriting. My dearest Thomas, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. It means you've had to face Lisa without me, and it means you've probably felt more alone and frightened than you've ever felt in your life, but you're not alone. You never were. Every word of advice I ever gave you, every conversation we ever had about right and wrong, every moment we spent building this life together, it's all still there. I'm still there. In every decision you make, in every stand you take, I've given you the weapons you need to fight this battle. The trusts, the evidence, the legal safeguards, they're all designed to protect what we built together. But more than that, I've given you 47 years of partnership, of love, of learning how to be strong when the world tries to break you. Lisa will try to take everything. She'll use our son, our grandchildren, our legacy as weapons. Don't let her. Be ruthless if you have to be. Be cold if you need to be. But above all, remember what we built and why we built it. Remember that some things are worth fighting for, even when you're tired and grieving and ready to give up. Michael will come back to us. I know he will. He's weak now, poisoned by her influence, but he's still our son. Still has our blood, our values deep down. When he falls, and he will fall, be there to catch him. But make him earn his way back. Make him understand what he threw away. Make him better than he was. I love you, Thomas. I loved you from the moment I met you, and I'll love you from beyond the grave. And when your time comes, whenever that may be, I'll be waiting. We'll sit together in whatever comes next, and we'll look back on this life we built, and we'll know that it meant something, that it mattered. Protect our legacy, protect our family, and know that I'm proud of you always. Forever yours, Margaret. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face before I finally folded it carefully and placed it back in the notebook. Then I closed my eyes and let myself feel her presence in the room, in the chair, in the very air around me. We did it, I whispered to her ghost. We protected what we built. Michael's coming back to us, the girls are safe, and Lisa paid for what she tried to do to us. We won, Margaret. You won. And in the silence that followed, I swear I felt her hand in mine one more time, squeezing gently, telling me what I already knew, that love outlasts death, that legacy outlasts betrayal, and that some battles are worth fighting even when you have to fight them alone. But I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. Margaret had made sure of that. 6 months later, on what would have been our 48th wedding anniversary, Michael and I stood in front of the Callahan construction office with a new sign. It was Emma's idea, actually. She'd suggested it one night at dinner, in that matter-of-fact way that children have when they see clearly what adults make complicated. If Grandma helped build the company, she'd said, shouldn't her name be on it too? So we changed it. From Callahan Construction to Callahan and Callahan Construction. Partners. Since 1976, Margaret's name in bronze letters, permanent and proud, acknowledging what had always been true, that she hadn't just supported the business, she'd built it alongside me. Equal partners in everything. We had a small ceremony for the unveiling. Just family and a few old friends who'd known us from the beginning. Michael gave a speech about his mother, about how he'd finally understood what she'd tried to teach him all along. Emma and Sophie pulled the cloth off the sign together, squealing with excitement. And I stood there with tears in my eyes, looking at my wife's name gleaming in the sunlight, and I knew she was there, watching, smiling, proud of what we'd fought for and what we'd saved. Lisa had tried to destroy us. She'd schemed and lied and manipulated, thinking that grief had made us weak, that Margaret's death had left us vulnerable. She'd calculated the value of our legacy in dollars and cents and thought she could simply take it. She was wrong. Because Margaret Callahan had spent 47 years teaching me that the most valuable things in life can't be stolen, can't be bought, can't be destroyed by greed or ambition or betrayal. She taught me that legacy isn't about money, it's about values passed down, lessons learned, love that echoes across generations. And in the end, that was the real revenge. Not the prison sentence or the financial ruin or the public humiliation. The real revenge was that we survived, we endured, we protected what mattered, and we proved that no amount of manipulation or malice could break what Margaret and I had built together. Lisa lost everything because she never understood that fundamental truth. Some things are worth more than money. Some legacies can't be stolen, and some love is strong enough to reach beyond the grave and protect what matters most. Margaret had won. Not through cruelty or vengeance, but through wisdom and foresight and an unshakable commitment to protecting the family she loved. She'd turned her last months of life into a strategic masterpiece, a chess game played across time, where every move she made was designed to protect us from exactly what Lisa had tried to do. We hadn't just won a legal battle, we'd won something far more important. We'd proven that Margaret's life, her values, her love, all of it mattered, all of it would endure, and that in the end was the greatest revenge of all. Margaret's name in bronze, permanent, unbreakable, just like her love